Today we play golf.
Let me show you how we do it in the pros.
Yeah! Welcome to Behind the Golf Brand Podcast.
I never miss with the 7-iron.
A conversation with some of the most interesting innovators and entrepreneurs behind the biggest names in golf.
My friends were the golf clubs. I lived on the golf course. I lived on the driving range.
From pro talk.
You should learn something from each and every single round you play in.
To fun from on and off the green.
Why would you play golf if you don't play it for money?
Just let me put the ball in the hole.
This is Behind the Golf Brand Podcast with Paul Liberatore. Behind the Golf Brand Podcast is sponsored by On Point, the revolutionary three-dimensional domed golf ball marker. On Point provides alignment recognition as small as a degree of inaccuracy from the planned course of the putt face angle. Endorsed by Jim Furyk, U.S. Open champion and 17-time PGA Tour winner. On Point alignment technology has been proven to increase putting performance and help lower your score. Visit onpointgolf.us and be sure to use code GA10 for a 10% discount. On Point, make more putts.
What's up, guys? Paul from Golfers Authority. Welcome to the Behind the Brand Podcast. This week, I have my good friend, Terry Koehler from Edison Wedges, and I'm really excited to have him on the show. He's known for the wedges. He's the wedge man. I mean, that's not his nickname, but I'm going to make that up for today. But he makes a phenomenal wedge, phenomenal just history of what he's gone through and invented and developed and worked with. It's amazing. Like he probably is the most well-known wedge person that I know. So I'm very excited to have him on the show. This is, I believe, episode 27. So I can't believe we're actually at 27 episodes this year. So welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me, Paul. Look forward to visiting and diving into what I've been doing in my life to try to push the wedge envelope further along.
I love wedges. I don't know. I feel like it's like the redheaded stepchild, right? Like people don't give enough credit to the wedge because the wedge is what really gets the ball next to the hole. That's what I think. So,
well, the wedge part of the game is really not gotten, I think, a proportionate share of engineering and technology attention. I think there's a lot of reasons for that, but I have, as you might imagine, being a wedge guy, I've got wedges in my collection dating back, into the late 30s when right after Saracen was credited with inventing the sand wedge. And
that's cool.
What really amazed me is I can take wedges from as far back as the 50s and 60s into the 80s and 90s, into the early 2000s, and even into the last few years. And you really don't see much change in these golf clubs. But look at what's happened to drivers and irons and the advent of hybrids, putter shapes. I mean, you've gone through radical redesigns of nearly everything in our golf bag. And wedges are still pretty much the same piece of molded metal that we've always had, all the weights on the bottom. And I just think it's time for golfers to realize that. And you're losing strokes with the wedges in your bag, and these what I call tour design wedges. They all look alike, and they're very volatile. I've put them on Iron Byron for 20 years in the swing robot, and that high face impact that doesn't go anywhere, that toe shot that has no spin. These aren't your fault. That's built into the golf club, and I just wanted to really.
People don't know that, right? They're like, "What's wrong with my shot? I can't figure this out," and they try to compensate for it.
Well, exactly. I mean, I'm watching the Masters this past week and looking at the magical short game that these tour players have. And when you realize that these guys are masters, I'm kind of skipping around here, but the reason I think wedges haven't changed is because of tour players. So if you look at the magical short game shots these guys hit, I mean, they control the trajectory, speed, distance, spin. They control those factors independently because they're so talented, because they spend so many thousands of hours with wedges in their hand. Well, if you give one of them a new driver that goes 10 yards further and 4 degrees straighter, it's in the bag immediately. That's pretty easy. But if you give him a wedge that launches a little different, spins a little different, distances a little different, you just screwed up thousands of hours of practice. His whole life has been built on a short game. And, the rank and file tour players out there shooting 2 or 3 under par, hitting 11, 12, 13 greens. So they've got to be doing it with a magical short game, and you can't afford to screw that up. And so I don't really worry about those guys. They got Bob Oakey and Roger Cleveland, some brilliant people taking care of them. But I'm looking for the guy listening to your podcast, the guy that's a 6 or 8 or a 12 or a 20 that's going, I just want my gap wedge to go 105 yards every time. That's all I'm after.
I think most players are like that, right? I mean, that's like the majority of golfers. No one, I mean, exactly. I would love to know the numbers of like how many people are just crappy at golf, right? Like, I think almost everybody. I think there's probably like the few that get to play all the time and they have like, less than a 10 handicap or something. But then like everybody else out there play a couple times a year and they just want to be like not bad. You know what I mean? Like they just want to have a consistent shot.
Our whole industry revolves all around the pretty serious player. The guy's playing 20, 30 rounds a year. He really wants to be better. He doesn't have the time to go spend, 6 hours a week on short game practice on this thing. And he's going to hit some low in the face and some high in the face and some a little on the toe, a little toward the heel. And that's why he's playing a 460cc driver. That's why he's playing a big mallet putter. That's why he's playing a cavity back, perimeter weighted iron. That's why he's carrying hybrids instead of 3 irons. And this guy's carrying the same wedge a tour player carries. And why? Because face it, the best short game you've ever seen at a country club in America is not as good as the worst short game of the guy on the Korn Ferry Tour. I mean, these guys are magical around the greens, and they've done it strictly through time. They spend thousands of hours. And I like to use Justin Thomas. I think he seems like a really nice kid, and he's wanted to be a tour player since he was 8 years old. And since he was 8 years old, he's been screwing around the short game green, hitting flop shots and these shots and these shots. And he's done it with essentially the same wedges for the last 15, 16 years of his life. So he's used to what that ball will do off that golf club. He doesn't want you to change the ball performance off that club every time he turns around because he'd have to relearn his short game every time. I mean, I guess the perfect example, I look at that shot that Sung Jae Im hit from behind 15 at Augusta on Sunday. I don't know if you watched that or not. He flies it over the green. He's back by the pond. He's got to chip it up that slope into a green slope and away from him to the water. And he hits it with the perfect trajectory, perfect spin, and perfect distance to two-hop it onto the green and let it trickle over the collar down to about 5 feet. I guarantee the best short game guy at your club could hit that shot for a month and never get it that close. I mean, these guys are, and he gets one crack at it, right? But they're so good and they know what their wedge will do. But the reality is we don't have their skills. We don't need to play their golf clubs. If we did, everybody would. I mean, and here's a perfect example. I'm sorry I kind of get on the soapbox, but less than 2% of golfers play a pure forged blade iron because they know they're not good enough to play that. 8 out of 10 of the tour leaders in greens and regulation play a tour blade forged iron. Tiger and all these guys, they play a forged blade because they can make the ball do what they want because it serves their skill set. But these 99% of golfers that won't play that forged blade are trying to play the same wedge those guys play.
No, I think you're right. I mean, you're seeing it a lot, especially what I like is like in putters too, right? Because putters have always been like the redheaded stepchild too. And like only in the last, 10 years, putters have like been redesigned and they're starting to do with new shapes and weighting. And like, it's like fine. it's like all the attention was spent on the driver, right? Or it has been for 25 years. Before it was like pretty much everything was standard. And now it's like, it's kind of cool because you're seeing products being developed made for the everyday player, right? That is looking to get better, that may or may not even get on the tour. But a lot of brands don't give a crap if they doesn't get on the tour because they're not trying to sell tour players, and you see it with balls too, right? Look at balls in the last 15 years, right? Or not even that long, with Snell and Encore and some of these newer brands coming out with technology that's, as good as the best balls out there. It's even better, I think, some instances. So
the golf ball, I mean, and our industry revolves around the idea of number one on tour. I mean, Titleist, and give them credit, they've dominated the tour and golf ball count for as long as I've been in golf, and they make hay with that. But so I think people look to the tour, but you have to temper that. I mean, you're not looking to play. And one of the things about wedges, coming back to the tour player, and the comparison of the tour type wedge to the forged blade iron, I've put them on iron by iron. I've put them on the swing robot. I've measured all kind of impact. A tour blade muscle back 9-iron and pitching wedge is more forgiving than any of the wedges on the market today. So if you don't think you're good enough tour blade iron, why are you playing a tour wedge? Because it's more volatile, and the measure of a wedge is smash factor. It's every golf club. Every golf club has one pinpoint spot on the face that is the sweet spot. And what we've chased with big drivers, with cavity back irons, with the big mallet putters, we have chased trying to not expand the sweet spot because it's always going to be one little pinpoint, but to mitigate the deterioration of impact quality as you make impact away from that center spot. So you can hit that driver a half inch toward the toe and you can get 98% of your distance out of it. You can hit that big mallet putter a half inch off center and you're still going to get a good roll on it. You can hit that cavity back iron a half an inch off center and you can still get a pretty functional shot, leave you on the fringe instead of on the green. But when you miss the sweet spot in that wedge by half an inch, we've proven, and we've seen it on time and again, you can lose 18 to 20% of your smash factor, which means that shot hit high in the face that ends up in the front bunker or worse, that wasn't your fault. That's built into the golf club. And it doesn't take a golf club guy like me to look at your wedge and look at where all the mass is. It's in the bottom of the golf club. And if you hit it down close to the bottom of the club, you get a totally different shot than if you hit it in the middle of the club or even a little high on the club. And my singular mission with the Edison Forged wedges, Paul, was to say, I want you as an amateur to have at least the same amount of forgiveness in your wedges as you have in your cavity back iron and your driver. Why should you settle for less than that?
And most players want that. They want to get better. That's why I think it's kind of interesting. This is why I like products, right? Because I feel like I'm the typical golfer, right? I don't have a lot of time to play. I want to be good. I just don't have the time to play. So I'd rather spend the money on equipment that will make me potentially better, right? Or the technology that make me potentially better to make up for all that time that I don't have, right? So if I only can play once a week or 4 times a month or whatever it might be, I would rather purchase something that will help me be a little bit better because I don't have time to go to the driving range every night or the putting green. And I think that's what's kind of cool about what you're doing with Edison is that like no one's been doing that. Right? Like you get these gimmicky wedges, right? Like a gimmicky wedge or whatever it might be. That's different. That's like a gimmick. But it's almost like what you're doing is really taking the technology to another level and bringing that to players who need it. Does that make sense?
Exactly. And I mean, gimmicky, I don't use that word in a derogatory standpoint, but there is a category of wedges out there that have these huge wide soles on them.
Yeah.
They're terrible out of the bunker and it strikes fear in you to walk into a bunker. Then you ought to have one of those in your bag, probably strictly for bunker shots, because you're not going to hit other, delicate pitch shots with that big sole. It's not going to work for you. But if you play soft sand and you have trouble, then by all means get one of those. It's kind of like if you don't like hitting long irons and middle irons, play hybrids all the way up to 30, 32 degrees.
It's your bag. I mean, you do what you want.
Yeah, it's your bag. Build your bag to your strengths and your weaknesses. I mean, for example, I like a single piece forged blade because I like to work the golf ball. I just like the feel of that. Could I lower a shot or two off my scores with a perimeter weighted cavity back club? Maybe, but it's not important to me as the ability to hit shots that I know how to hit. And I play a very small driver. I just don't like looking at these big 460cc drivers. I play a 400cc prototype I developed about 5 years ago. It's as long as anybody's showed me that they're coming up with, but I can work the golf ball with it. I like to hit different golf shots. The next guy, he may just I just want to hit it and go. Well, fine, play something different than what I play. It's your bag. Like you said, it's your bag. And, it's kind of like a football team. You recruit the players for the offense you like to run and the defense you like to run. And that may be a different skill set from the next guy over here who's, runs a different offense. So I think it's, very interesting. And I've referenced your golf bag as your team in my blog that I write every week. And, it's like you need to recruit your team with care and caution and forethought. So what is it that you need to, you've got a driver for your tee shots and a putter for your putts, and you've got 12 other players. And it's very important to put that team together for the courses you play, the skill sets you exhibit.
Yeah, including the ball. I mean, it's like you're putting your team, I never really thought of that analogy, like your bag is your team, really, and you have to build that team for you. And, that when you buy other products, you're just swapping out players, right? And be like, well, this is not working for me. But it's because you don't know. It's not saying that's a bad product. It's just saying that product's not the right product for you. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
It's so here's my big shocker moment. Like, I don't like using the Pro V1. Never been able to hit it. ever in my entire life. I always feel like I'm cool when I open up a new sleeve, like, oh, look, I got the Pro V1. And it goes right into the desert or right into the tree line, and I lose the ball. But if I use something else, like a Chrome Soft or a Snell MTB, like, it hits straight. It's like, it's the same shot. So it's like, you have to find the right product for you. It doesn't matter what the name brand on it is either. It doesn't matter. It just matters if it works. That's my opinion. And that's why I like exposing brands that don't have that people don't know about yet. Because I think that's where, like this past year, I got fitted for the first time by a brand up in the Northwest that custom, club maker. And like, I had never been fitted like that before. And just the improvement of my game was like 100% different, and it's just because, before that I had, the $1,600 set of irons from Titleist, so it's like, I still have that set of irons that I'm never going to use ever again because I got these new clubs that actually help me with my game. And that's all it really comes down to. I want to be better. That's it, And,
one of the things that we talk a lot about, and the reason that Edison is a custom company and we build every set to order, we have our standard shaft offerings. Most companies have one standard steel shaft and that's it. It's a heavy, stiff steel shaft. The vast majority of golfers are playing lighter weight steels, they're playing graphites, they're playing softer flexes. So we offer a standard weight steel shaft in stiff and regular flex. We offer a lightweight steel shaft in stiff and regular. We offer a graphite shaft in stiff, regular, and A-flex. Because I'm a big believer, I've seen it for 30 years that I've been focused on wedges. You want your wedges in the shaft to blend seamlessly to your irons. I call it the seamless transition. So if you have, get out of your cart with me and you walk over to your ball and you're somewhere around 100 to 110 yards, you grab your laser or your GPS and you grab your set match pitching wedge and your aftermarket gap wedge and you walk over. You know it's going to be one of these two clubs. If those clubs are an ounce apart in weight, if they're, they can be 20 or 30 grams different in weight. They can be 2 flexes different in flex. And you're not thinking of making a different swing. It's either a pitching wedge or a gap wedge for you. And you're thinking you're going to make the same swing depending on which club you choose. But yet one club is an entirely different animal than the other one. And so I think that the shaft is so important in wedges, why we don't have stock wedges laying around with a heavy, stiff steel shaft in them, because I just don't think that's right for most people. If you're playing, standard weight, stiff flex steel in your irons, then yeah, you're going to want that standard weight, stiff flex steel wedge. But one of my examples, there was a young lady at our clubs playing collegiate golf. She's not very big, but she's a really good player, but she doesn't hit it very far. And she was telling me about her new wedges from one of the major brands. And I looked at her and I said, I'm looking at your irons and you're playing an R-Flex 70-gram graphite shaft in your irons and you've got a 130-gram stiff flex steel shaft in your wedges, which is the same shaft the tour players play. These guys are all Popeyes. They work out. They have big forearms. They're strong as heck. You can't manage that golf club around the greens to hit the shots you want to hit. You don't have the hand strength to manage that much golf club. It's just more club than you can handle. And I said, you let me build you a set of wedges with a shaft that's closer to what's in your irons, you're going to be amazed at how good your wedge play gets because you're not trying to muscle this big old heavy golf club around. And people don't think about that.
It's a transition, right? Because you're used to like hitting this flex that's perfect for you and everything, your irons or whatever it might be. And then you go to a steel shaft, wedge. And it's like, whoa. And like now you have to like, your brain does not know what's going on at that point. It's like, oh, do I hit this? How do I hit this? Because it's used to a lighter, and more flex and whatever it might be. It's just fun. I never thought about it that way.
But I call it the seamless transition. We want that set of golf clubs from your long and middle irons through your short irons.
That's really smart because you go from, I never really thought about this. So like you go from like your driver, right? Tons, depending on what your flex is on your shaft and your driver, to your irons. And then usually if you get fitted or you get a really high quality set of irons, like the shaft should be really good, right? So it should be kind of like, but then you go right to your wedges and it's like the steel shaft wedge. That's it. Unless you get fitted or whatever it might be. I didn't think about that. That's true though. And that's what you want, right? You want to see them transition through all of your clubs until because it's messing with your mind. And you don't realize that because you're not good enough to figure it out, nor do you have like the background, because most guys are just out there to play. They don't know. I would never know.
And so, one of my critique of the wedge category is, it's like nobody talks about anything but grooves and grinds. I call it the G&G syndrome.
It's so true.
And But there is so much to the golf club head, and the reason they only talk about grooves and grinds is because everybody's club head is essentially the same. I mean, if you're realistic and go into a store and go to the wedge display, and if you can make yourself look at every wedge without looking at the graphics, the essential design of the wedge is unchanged. All the weight's in the bottom. It's thin in the upper 2/3. It's got a heavy stiff steel shaft in it. And, it's got some nuance to grind in there that I mean, Paul, the reality is and I don't do this, but Bob Bokey, Aaron Dill, Roger Cleveland, they can sit down with a Mickelson or a Woods or whatever, and they can tweak that sole of that golf club, and that player can feel that. You and I can't feel that. I've worked with tour players in the past. They can feel things you can barely measure. But, they were talking about this week that Augusta was so soft, the players were all going in and opting for wedges with more bounce. Well, that's fine for them. They walk into the trailer and they get free wedges. You and I don't get to do that if it rains last night.
No, you're just
we don't get to walk in the shop and say, hey, I want 3 new wedges with a little higher bounce because it rained last night.
They're going to laugh their ass off at you.
Okay.
All right, it's going to be $500 if you want to try them.
Exactly. So, I'm a big believer, and that's where my sole design came from, is what we call the Koehler sole. It's got a high bounce in the first part of the club and a low bounce in the back part of the club. The idea was, I don't know what my next lie looks like. I don't know what the turf conditions are going to be on that shot, that day, that course. I need a sole design that if it calls for a high bounce, it's going to act like one. If it calls for a low bounce, it's going to act like one. And I created this on a golf trip to St. Andrews in 1990, and I just went into Octoloni's golf shop and ground around on a wedge because the tight turf over there was killing me with my conventional sand wedge at the time. And I've been perfecting that sole design for 30 years now, and it just keeps getting better and better. But that's one aspect of the wedge you do need to consider. But I don't believe I can fit bounce to you or to anybody else because I'm going to fit turf conditions. They constantly change. I'm going to fit your swing path, but it constantly changes too. I mean, you're a recreational player. Sometimes you take a deep divot, sometimes you don't. So how am I going to fit something that changes all the time? And
exactly.
So what I can do is I can give you a club head design that has the most consistent smash factor around the face. You're going to get a consistent transfer of energy, so you're not going to see that big distance disparity. I can give you a sole that is more versatile than any other sole. It'll handle more turf types, more lies, more swing paths. I can put face texture in the golf club that'll optimize your coefficient of friction and build the club to your spec so at least it fits you. Right shaft and right grip, right angles. And I mean, you're gonna hit 10 or 12, 15 shots around with your wedges. They need to fit. They need to be right for you.
Yeah. I mean, I never really thought about that. I mean, that's why about the podcast. Like, I talk to smart people that are way smarter than me in golf. And I was like, I didn't think about that. That's so true. All right. So we're going to play a game. New game today. It's called, I made this up in my head. So this game's going to be called Time Machine with Terry. And we're going to go back in time. And I want you to tell me, what was your first golf memory?
My first golf memory is I grew up on a little 9-hole course in South Texas. And my dad was one of the best players in town. And the little barbecue, we called it the barbecue circuit. Every town had their little weekend 2-man best ball tournament through the course of the summer. And we came out in the 50s and 60s to watch these good players. And my dad, just before really anybody had electric cart, my dad had a big old leather Burton golf bag on a bag boy pull cart. I was 2 or 3 years old. But I remember it was a big treat for me to climb up on straddle the ball pocket, hold on to the handle of that bag, and have my dad pull me around in that bag boy pull cart, and my feet wouldn't touch the ground. So I couldn't have been over 2 or so, but that's my earliest memory of golf.
Cool.
And my earliest memory of playing golf is, again, we were blessed to grow up on this little 9-hole golf course, and we were out playing 9 holes by ourselves when we were 6, 7, 8 years old. I mean, I had a 2-wood, a 5-iron, and a 9-iron, and a little brass blade putter. I wish I still had that thing. They were all cut down, and the leather was wrapped right onto the shaft for my little hands. And I remember that, I remember growing into that golf course. When I first started playing, the par 4s were 3 good wood shots to get to that 310 or 15-yard par 4. And then it got to where you could get there with 2 wood shots and a 9-iron. And then it was, I can get home on some of them with a 2. I always hit a 2-wood off the tee as a little kid. And, I could hit that 2-wood and a 5-iron and get home on that 300-yard hole. And then you just grew into the golf course and grew into my first set of irons and grew into my first pair of FootJoy golf shoes. And, it was fun thinking about, thank you for taking me back, actually. But it was fun just thinking about the evolution of my golf from those little 9-hole rounds and, kicking it around to.
I remember that too. My dad did the same thing, man. He took adult clubs, cut them down, and put grips on it. And I was like 3 or 4 years old. I remember that. I mean, it's funny because I have a story too. One time, I never told the story. I should tell the story because not a great story for me. One time, I was at the driving range with my dad, and I was probably 4, and I got hit in the head with the iron by my. Yeah, it was bad. Like by my friend. Like my dad took my friend and me. No, for real, it's a true story. I never told the story before. I don't think my wife even knows the story. My mom will tell her though, but we went to the driving range at Kenny Mac, which is a public course here in Tempe, and I was walking behind my friend, and I was like 4, and he swung back, and the club hit me in the head and chopped off like 3/4 of my ear, like for reals. And it was like, all I remember is being in my mom and dad's car driving to the hospital with a towel wrapped around my head. And it I guess it traumatized my parents. I don't really remember, but like they sewed my ear back on, and you would never know. You can barely even see the scar, but like, yeah. And they literally the iron went into my head. It was crazy. But
wow, lucky you didn't have.
I freaking forgot that story until now. Holy crap! I can't believe I never told that story ever. No, it's like my mom's like, "Oh, do you remember that?" I'm like, barely. I remember how to getting stitches. I remember that, but yeah, my dad used the same thing. That's cool. So, how'd you get into golf? What's your background? Did you go to college? Were you like a college player or something? Or did you just like play and you got into it? Or what's your story?
I mean, our household revolved around golf. My life revolved around golf on that little 9-hole course. So by the time I got out of high school, I was, a scratch player and maybe I lived on little 9-hole courses. It was a big treat to go to an 18-hole course where we would go play, district and regional, golf. But we had a really good golf environment in our little town. It was a big deal in our town. And
what's that town called? Where is it at in South Texas?
The name of the town is Cuero, Cuero. It's down southeast of San Antonio.
Oh, nice.
And I mean, just to give you an example of how golfy our town was, when I was a freshman in high school, we had 160 kids in the whole high school. We had 30 out for golf. My freshman year, I was shooting 78s and 9s, and I made the 5th spot on the B team. 78s and 79s in the 60s. So, it was a very golf-oriented town. So I went off to Texas A&M, got a degree in marketing, nice. Came back and went to San Antonio and went to work for an ad agency. And the first sales call I ever made on my own was to the Ray Cook Putter Company, which was in San Antonio. I said, hell, if I'm going to be in the ad business, I'm going to go for accounts that'll be fun.
Yeah, you're interested, not like a dentist or something. Yeah.
So I started, learning the golf industry from that standpoint. But I was really drawn. I was always the kid that took my toys apart to see how they worked. And my dad, we rebuilt our fishing reels and we built custom rifles and we reloaded ammunition and we did things like that. And I was my daddy's boy. I was always there at his elbow when he was into a project. And so I was always the kid that took my toys apart, see how they work, put them back together. And so I was really drawn to the back end of the place where the putters were made. How are they doing that? How are they designing that? How does tooling work? Just because that's what interests me. And I figured the more I knew about the product, the better marketer I could be. And so through that, and this was right around 1980, 40 years ago, holy cow. And then I began to meet some other small.
Terry's like, oh man, I'm old. What the heck?
So, and I began to meet some other small golf brands, Odie Chrisman putters, the fabulous hickory shafted putters made down in Alabama, Joe Powell Golf out of Florida, Newman Leather made leather grips and gloves. And so I just began to meet some of these other small golf companies. And
that's cool.
And built a little clientele of golf companies. And in the mid 80s, I just decided I wanted to design a putter, and I designed my first putter in the mid 80s and kind of got really focused on that and designed putters through the mid to late 80s for my own company and then for Merritt Golf. And then that took me to the Ben Hogan company in the 90s when they moved to Virginia, designing a line of putters for them. And then I started fiddling with wedges. I told you about the story in 1990. I was in St. Andrews, Scotland, and I began grinding on the sole of a wedge and started my first golf company in the mid-'90s called Reid Lockhart, making wedges and a beautiful blade iron. And we did some persimmon woods with a very exotic.
Cool.
And that began and just kind of morphed into a wedge-specific company called EIDOLON, which morphed into a wedge-specific company called SCOR, where I introduced for the first time progressive weighting in wedges. And we built a great following at SCOR, and I got distracted and went off and brought the Ben Hogan company back into the golf industry and gave that my all for a couple of years and retired and just was burned out. But then I just started writing my blog again for Golf WRX and as the wedge guy, which I had written many articles. I think I'm up to 1,000 articles now, and mostly on the short game. And I write about other things. This week it was musings on the Masters, but just sharing 40 years in this industry, and people, knock on wood, they've liked what I write. Sometimes they skewer me if I get off path a little bit, but that's what's fun about a blog. So I had people saying, when are you going to do wedges again? Scores were the best ever. And so I've turned my focus back into wedges. I said, I'm going to pull out all the stops. I'm going to eliminate the barriers. This is a wedge-specific company. We're going to do wedges the way I think they ought to be done, with no real concern about how wedges have always been designed. I looked at them and said, what should they be? Not what have they been, but I'm not going to improve on wedges. I'm going to start over. What should a high loft golf club do? And that's really what the Edison Forged is all about.
So I just want to rewind something, you guys. Okay, because, Terry's very modest. He's like, oh, yeah, I did this. Terry was the CEO of Ben Hogan and the founder and president of Ben Hogan Golf. Like, that's when he's like, oh, I was there for a little bit. It wasn't like he was there, like, in accounting. Like, he ran the company. All right. So, like, I mean, this guy knows a lot of stuff, he's very, very modest right now because, to bring a brand back to the industry, right? A brand, because what happened? Like, they went away for a while, didn't they? Or because they were around the '90s. I remember that.
Yeah, the company and Ben Hogan was my childhood idol, and to talk about it
my dad too. Yeah.
So the company, thrived in Fort Worth for many years, and in the early '90s. It was purchased and taken out of Fort Worth and moved to Richmond, Virginia. And I think, they put Mr. Hogan out to pasture. The company, I think, lost its way, lost its soul a little bit. And then that company sold the Ben Hogan
brand.
They reduced the company by 3/4 of the size and went off on different pathways that proved to be not right. The company was then sold to Spalding. Spalding brought it back and really got a lot of interest in it. But then Spalding went into bankruptcy. Callaway bought all the assets out of bankruptcy, and they really wanted the golf ball business, but because Spalding was number 2 ball in the world, and but the bankruptcy court said no, you have to take everything, and so Callaway ended up with the Ben Hogan brand, and they gave it a little life, and then and I understand their decision. How can we serve 2 premium brands? We are Callaway Golf. What do we do with Ben Hogan?
Yeah, exactly.
Put it on the shelf, and Ben Hogan stayed in the closet for 7, 8, 9 years. Perry Ellis Company bought the Ben Hogan brand primarily for a line of apparel. And then I went to them and said, this brand needs to be in hard goods, and worked out a deal with them to bring the Ben Hogan brand back to hard goods. So we kind of rolled what I had been doing in SCOR wedges. We rolled that into Ben Hogan and created a line of irons called the Fort Worth of my design, and a line of wedges called the TK 15 of my design, and launched the company. And it was bigger. It was too big. And it was just, things were moving too fast. I made my share of mistakes in how I did it and let it go too fast. But, and when I left the company after about 6 months, it went into bankruptcy, and then it reemerged as a consumer direct company. But I didn't have anything to do with that. And that's where it is now. I don't know how they're doing. It's none of my business, but
no, it's cool. It's cool to hear that. Like, Terry knows his stuff, like a lot of people, I don't think that's the way I love about the podcast. A lot of people don't know these people behind these brands, right? These stories. And when they're like, holy crap, I don't know, I'm new to this whole industry. I love golf, but the more I learn about products and people, I just love it, right? Because the history, the stories, how things were developed, why they were developed. I had Dean Snell on the show. I learned more in that hour than I learned ever in my entire life about balls. And I think that it's really cool because, what you've learned over the course of your your career is now you've moved into Edison Wedges, which is phenomenal, right? And I think that's really cool because people don't know that they need new wedges. Really, they just don't.
Well, you know what? My approach to golf clubs is I'm kind of a heretic maybe in some respects, in that I have a friend who's a longtime really high grade club fitter, and he has this statement. I'm going to plagiarize it. He'll know if he's listening, but he says the golf ball doesn't know. And the golf ball doesn't know if you're a man or a woman, a senior, a junior. All the golf ball knows, doesn't know what brand of irons those are. All the golf ball knows is, what were the conditions that impact? Club head speed, angle of attack, path, where in relation to the sweet spot of that golf club was impact made. And the ball's going to react to this set of really inhuman parameters. It doesn't. You look at the swings on the tour, there's a lot of different ways to get to impact, but for a ball to go perfect, there's only one set of parameters that can be in place, and that is the path and the point of impact and the swing path, the club head path, the angle of attack all have to be perfect for a perfect shot to happen. And I'm a big believer that I love forged blades. I did a forged blade with Reid Lockhart in the early 90s, which was the first one to ever put some weight out on the toe, because that's where forged blades are weak. They're weak out toward the toe. I did that with the Fort Worth blade that I designed when I brought Hogan back, but it's to put a little bit of a depression in the back of the golf club. So you can build forgiveness into a forged blade. You don't have to go to a thin face and inserts and tungsten and all of that stuff. But what I want from a golf club is I want pinpoint accuracy. I want my best shots to be absolutely perfect. I've got a friend of mine who just went off into a set of perimeter weighted cavity back irons. He's experimenting with one of the top brands. And he says, every once in a while I catch a 7-iron and it'll go 15 yards further than I thought it would. And I said, well, that's what cavity back golf clubs do. There is a hot spot in that golf club historically. And to me, iron play is all about being pin high. If you're pin high, that you're not going to score the golf course too badly. And, if you leave the face open, it's going to the right. Perimeter weighting won't fix that. If you turn the face over through impact, it's going to be a snap hook to the left, and perimeter weighting isn't going to fix that. Perimeter weighting cannot fix a swing flaw. It cannot fix a face angle flaw. What perimeter weighting can do is give you a measure of forgiveness. If you square the face, the path is good, everything's good, but you miss the sweet spot a little bit. That's all perimeter weighting can do. We can be honest about that. And there's another wedge company that talks about chunks and skulls and all that. I'm sorry, I'm a wedge designer, and so are they, and you cannot fix a chunk by the design of the golf club. I can't fix a skull by the design of the golf club. If you hit it in the eyebrows, it really doesn't matter what kind of wedge you're playing. And if you lay the sod over the top of it, it really doesn't matter what kind of wedge you're playing. What I can help is that shot that's hit a little high on the face, a little toward the toe, a little toward the heel, a little low. What I'm after is to give you the end result more like the good shot. That's really what I can do as a golf club designer. I'm realistic about that. And I know that the Edison wedges do it better than anybody's, and that's what they were designed to do. It's why they look so different, is they were designed to give you different performance. It's the old definition of insanity of doing the same thing over and over, expecting different results. You've bought, brand A wedges, brand B wedges, brand C wedges, and you think you're still a bad wedge player. Well, you bought the same golf club with 3 different labels on it.
It is.
For 40 years, go pull the wedges out of your garage that are 40 years old, and they're not that much different than the ones you just bought last year. Well, you can't get different performance if you don't change the golf club. And so that's, to me, TaylorMade wasn't afraid to make a wood out of metal instead of persimmon, and Callaway wasn't afraid to double the size of the metal wood and then do it again and do it again. And Karsten wasn't afraid to introduce the Ping Answer in the world of 8802s and bullseyes. And most of the real radical innovations in our industry have come from upstart brands when you think about it.
All of them, right? I don't know that somebody's walked into it. It's like, do you? I can't think of anybody. They're just like, oh, they made, Titleist wanted to make a ball, right? And then, I don't know, that's how it started. They wanted to make a better ball, and they figured it out. They spent a lot of time and a lot of money and had a lot of smart people, and they figured it out. And then, I think, was Titleist an upside brand? No, but they weren't a golf ball manufacturer, right? So, and that's what I think is cool about now is that it's so much easier to bring something to market than it was ever in history, right? And so
because you now have the internet, you can
exactly. You can find whatever you need. And there's a lot of, in communication and just like, I don't know. I think that's what's so cool is like you see some of these new innovative brands, whether it's, hardware, golf clubs or whatever, tech or even apparel, whatever it might be. It's just kind of cool because now you're able to actually like do it and not spend, in half the time or, 90% or less of the time.
Yeah. And there's such good quality manufacturing and, you still have to know what you're doing. But, I think that the key is you have to set out to solve a problem that really exists. And, there's a lot of products out there, not just in golf, but everywhere. It's like, well, that's an interesting product, but why would you need it? And so you have to, in my talk to so many people, I've been very blessed to analyze 40,000 golfer profiles in the wedge fitting. And golfers share from handicap 4 to handicap 24. They share the same problems. They don't get consistent distance. Their spin is inconsistent. They get ballooning trajectories, and their misses come up way short. And so it's like if everybody has 80% of golfers have the exact same problems, why don't I go fix those for them?
Yeah, because that's what matters, right? It's not like, we're going to reinvent the same thing again.
Problems, don't like my wedges, that's fine. Nobody's ever made a golf club for everybody. It's never happened in history, right?
No. So tell me about tell me about the wedges. So is there different lines of wedges or is it one main wedge design and then you have different, can you tell me more about the Edison wedge?
So we created Edison as a Forged golf club. I believe that's the right way to make a golf club head, high quality. We introduced lofts from 49 to 59 degrees this year, odd numbers. The reason we do odd numbers is because our club is launching the ball lower. It's going further. It's spinning more. So, our 51 degree wedge is going to probably outperform your 50. And pitching wedges have settled in at 45 degrees. It's an odd number loft. That's where they are. The old 52, 56, 60 emerged from 48 degree pitching wedges. Well, that made sense when pitching wedges were 48 degrees, but they're now 45. So 52, 56, 60 in wedge loss doesn't make sense anymore. So we do odd numbers. In the spring, we're going to be expanding that line downward. We've already tooled it up and tested them. They're phenomenal pitching wedges of 45 and 47 degrees. We've added higher loft lob wedges of 61 to 63, which, and I'm personally, I'm not a lob wedge guy. I don't carry high loft wedges, but, I've hit them and I've hit them against the others. I have testers that we rely on that are telling me we've done something really special because high loft wedges are hard to handle. I mean, wedges in general give people trouble, Paul, because, the head is raked back 45, 50, 55, 60 degrees. You're going to hit a glancing blow with the wedge by nature because of all that loft. So, wedges they're very demanding on the golfer that your quality of impact be proper. And I think the number one way to improve your distance, your consistency, and everything with your wedge play is to slow down. Think of every wedge as kind of a soft touch shot and it's not like hitting a full 8-iron.
You're not hitting as hard as you possibly can make up in the air.
So, it's interesting when you look back and, I reference Ben Hogan a lot because he taught me so much through his writings. And in his book, Power Golf in 1949, he listed all of his yardages. Now, for golf club, the clubs were shorter, lighter, the ball didn't go as far, but he lifted his regular yardage, his minimum, and his maximum. And he showed maximum yards for a sand wedge of 50, but maximum yards for a driver was 300. So it wasn't like the man could not hit a sand wedge over 50 yards. It wasn't like that was the problem. But he wrote in that book that around the greens on certain shots, the sand wedge can be a very valuable tool. But back then they pitched the ball with a pitching wedge because a pitching wedge was 51 or 2 degrees. It was about like a gap wedge today. And so the big flange sand wedge was a wonderful bunker club, but there were other shots you could hit with it around the greens. But the modern golfer just instinctively grabs the sand wedge or lob wedge for every shot when they miss a green. And the sand wedge has changed to become a full swing golf club, but the club design didn't change to accommodate full swing performance. It's still very volatile of, those shots hit high in the face that pop up and go in the bunker and in the creek, the lake, and those kind of things. So, I think you have to look at wedges as, again, we'll go back to that team concept. This is the money end of your set. Your wedges and your putter are going to account for, 3/5 to 2/3 of your shots in a round of golf if you're playing the right tees. So you really ought to give a lot of attention to those clubs.
So what are the price points on the Edison wedges?
We're $179 with steel shaft, $194 with graphite. We're using all KBS shafts. We use the KBS Tour for standard weight steel, the KBS Tour 105 for lightweight steel, KBS Tour 80 graphite. We build on custom shafts. Anybody, if you have a shaft in your irons and you absolutely love it and you want your wedges to match, we'll do that. And we're a custom company. So we're about $20 more than a cast golf club off the rack that was assembled in China from one of the major brands. But you're going to get a forged golf club that is built to your order, your specifications, premium shaft, premium grip. If you went to one of the major brands and custom ordered a wedge with our shaft and our grip, you're going to go well over $200. You're still going to get a cast golf club head, and which we think is inferior. And we know the performance is inferior. That's the main thing. You're trying to buy performance. And we back everything with a guarantee. If you put them in your bag, you play them 3 or 4 rounds. If they're not doing what you think they ought to do, if they're not better than what you've had, by all means, send them back and we'll either try a different shaft or we'll take them back and give you a refund. I don't want anybody out there with an Edison wedge in their bag that's not deliriously happy.
It's your brand, right? It's not like it's just, you don't want that. Like that.
And we know the golf club outperforms the other clubs. We've proven it on the robot. We've proven it with live golfer testing on launch monitors. If you get the right shaft in it, you're going to see a more penetrating trajectory. You're going to see greatly enhanced spin. You're going to see the biggest thing you're going to see, Paul, is in that 2 or 3 or 4 rounds of golf, you're going to get away with some shots that you're going to go, wow, I didn't think that was going to get there. And that really is what wedge play is all about. If you're 94 yards or 114, whatever the number is, you want it to go as close to that distance as possible, whether you hit it a little thin, a little high in the face, a little on the toe. It's all about distance at that point. If you pull it or push it, I'm a wedge guy. I can't fix that. But what I'm out here is to fix your distance so that if you really believe a gap wedge is a 105-yard golf club, then this one's going to go 105 across a bigger area of the face than anybody else's wedge. I mean,
your price point is like teensy weensy, like more than, the SM8 or something, like just barely. SM8's like 160 to 170 bucks. So it's like, it's a little bit more, but then it's like, if you go buy that straight off the rack, you don't get to pick your shaft, right? Like, or if you don't like the shaft that's in there, now you have to go, it's like, I don't know. I think that's an excellent price point because it's almost like, in some ways, it's almost like semi-custom. You know what I mean? Because the person gets to choose what they want. I mean, you have your standard, right? And if they want some other shaft, they need to tell you, like, hey, I don't want that shaft. I want this shaft. Okay, cool. No worries. You know?
Well, and that golf club's going to have a generic steel shaft in it. Probably.
Exactly.
They have a lower grade Golf Pride grip than what we use, the Golf Pride MCC +4, which is the number 1 grip in the aftermarket. It costs 3 times as much as that grip they use. But
yeah, you're comparing a Ford to a Ferrari, right? For like $10. I mean, literally, it's like, I mean, that's what's so kind of cool. It's like people don't understand, because I know I didn't, right? The difference between a more fitted club than a non-more fitted club, right? They think, oh, I walk into Golf Galaxy or I walk into PGA Superstore and you say, oh, there's a new wedges over there. There's a new driver. And they don't know jack shit. They can't tell you anything about it. It's like, oh yeah, it's a new one. It just came out. It's really great. But they can't tell you anything. I mean, that's why I started my website. I'm like, they don't give you any information to make a decision. You just buy it because you go, oh, that's the newest one. It must be the best one they ever made. So, well,
the biggest difference between the Edison wedges and everybody else's, beside performance, is if you buy brand A, brand B, brand C, you go into the store and buy them and you take them out and play them 3 or 4 rounds and you say, this really isn't doing it for me. Your answer is that's kind of tough luck.
Yeah, you spent $600 on something you're never going to use.
Let's rework these to get them right for you. If we need to swap the shaft out, because we have people that will order a wedge with a certain shaft, but they didn't really think about it. And what we do, we have an experience on our website called Wedge Fit that takes you through an interrogation of sorts and an exchange of information. So we can learn about your ball flight, what kind of irons you're playing, what kind of shaft you're playing. We want you to get the right Edison wedges, not just Edison wedges. They need to be the right Edison wedges. And, the ones that are right for you may not be right for me at all. And loft and shaft and, length and angle. And, we think all those things, or we know for a fact, all those things have to be right if you're going to optimize wing performance.
No, I think it's just cool. I mean, I really do. To be able, like I said in the beginning of the podcast, people just forget about the wedge, right? Especially when you go buy like a set of clubs. Let's say you go, here it is. You go to the store, you buy a set of clubs. it's a la carte, right? You buy the irons, which may or may not come with a wedge, right? You buy a driver, and now you're like, what wedge do I buy? Right? And like, oh, it's one of these. Okay, that's scenario 1. Scenario 2 is you get fitted, but they don't come with wedges. If they do, it's like, oh yeah, these are the wedges that kind of come with these fitted clubs. But it's like it makes such a big difference getting the right fit for you, because everybody's different. We all don't play the same. We're all not the same handicap. Good, bad, and different doesn't matter really what it is. But it's like being able to actually find the right product that actually helps your game is what it comes down to, right? And that's like, I think it's one of the problems with the industry is that there's a lot of noise and a lot of money sort of marketing, and then people just buy because they think it's the right one and they don't know any better, and they only play 4 times a month, and they think they're cool because they have a cool branded, they think, right? And then next year something new comes out. Oh, so I don't know. That's what I like about what you guys are doing, because I don't really know of any other brands that are doing this right now, to be honest. I mean, that's what's so cool, because people can actually get a wedge that can help their game, and that's all really matters at this point.
And I've been around tour players in my life. I've worked with tour players in my life, and that's not what motivates me. What motivates me and really makes all of this worthwhile, starting a new company, being in the wedge business, is when somebody, writes us back and says, holy cow, my wedge game is better than ever. I went down from a 12 to a 9. And I mean, to me, that's the core of our whole golf population is we want to get better, and we're willing to go spend the time and the money to pursue getting better. I want to deliver a golf club that's going to help you in that pursuit. And if it doesn't help you in the pursuit, you send it back. I don't want to be in your bag going, I wish I wouldn't have bought those. I don't want that with anybody. And I have the luxury of patience, and we're small. And if anybody wants to talk to me, they can call and talk to me. And, I write my blog every week. If they want to interact with me on my blog, we can do that. We have, several thousand people a week read my blog. And I'm always sharing things I've learned in this 40 years adventure in the golf industry. And I've been a student of the game. My dad was real big on encouraging us all to, if you're going to get into something, be a student of it, whether it's bird hunting or saltwater fishing, fly fishing, golf. If you're going to get into something, be a student of it. And so that's always I, had the opportunity to augment my love of playing the game of golf with a knowledge of how the industry works and how the golf clubs work and what they can and can't do. I mean, I'm 68 going on 40, I feel like, and I just am thoroughly enjoying this ride and being able to do this for golfers and with golfers. Oh,
it's really cool. I mean, I like what you guys are doing. It's what's needed, and I think that's what's important right now is people understand that there are other options out there that actually can help their game, and that they don't have to listen to the hype. You know what I mean? And so I just want to say thank you for being on the show today. I really appreciate it. I know we've been talking back and forth. Actually, we're going to be reviewing some Edison Wedges. He's in the process of building them for both Damon and I, so I can't wait to play those bad boys. So be sure to look out, for the unboxing video and the review in the coming months. And I just want to say thank you again, Terry, for being on the show. And if you guys can, please check out Edison Wedges. And like you said, you can contact Terry too. Like Terry will talk to you. They'll help you figure out the right wedge for you. And if you want, really think about strokes you can save, right? It's needed in the marketplace right now. So thank you again for being on the show.
Well, thank you for having me, Paul. So always a pleasure talking about what we're doing and talking about golf. And thanks for taking me back on that little history of how I got started in this crazy game.
I'm going to start naming that segment Time Machine with Terry.
I like it.
All right. You take care. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Behind the Golf Brand Podcast.
You're going to beat me at golf?
Stay connected on and off the show by visiting golfersauthority.com. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment.
Golf is always more fun when you win.
Stay out of the beach and see you on the green.